If you've been around the residential property investment world for some time, particularly the late 2000s, early 2010s, you would have heard a lot of people banding and promoting courses, incidentally, about how you could find and acquire properties at 25% of below market value. That strategy, as the market started to improve, became more and more difficult, and of course, as a lot of training companies jumped in there, training people how to do these things, more and more competition, and those deals became harder and harder to find, to the situation today where it is a very, very difficult strategy, although it's being promoted to actually implement. But what if there was a way where you could genuinely have 25% below market value properties and build real equity, determine the end value before you actually entered into the proposition? In other words, one of the big difficulties is that when looking at a property is understanding what the end value is going to be, and you kind of hope and pray, you do maybe some modifications, improve it, maybe reconfigure it, and then you're waiting for the surveyor to come back and value it, because that's going to determine what you're going to be able to borrow against it, and therefore the hope is, and this is what is taught, is pull your money back out. So you're very much reliant on somebody else's decision rather than being in control yourself. To know all your costs going in, to have no competition, is that really possible? And to comply with all the regulations, the buy-to-let, HMO, and the whole residential letting area is becoming increasingly difficult, and there's lots of regulations coming in, making it harder and harder to make a return on your investment. And if you're in the rest of the UK and not in Scotland, then you may think things are bad. Have a look at what's happening in Scotland, and you'll realize how bad things can really become. So, and that's a sign of perhaps the way that the rest of the UK is heading in terms of legislation. Being able to build a cluster of properties, in other words, have a cluster of properties together, which makes the management very much easier. And of course, the big thing is that people are talking about, well, there's a crash coming up and this will be soon available. Actually, there is no crash coming up. It's going to be several years away. And if you want to know my thinking on that, I'll post a link up here to a video that I did a few weeks ago, and I'll put a link in the description below. A lot of YouTube channels are predicting that there's a crash. I'm afraid that they are going to kind of regret making those statements. Nevertheless, is this possible to have 25% of below market value properties? The short answer is yes, but not in the way that you might think. And so therefore, what I would like to do is just spend the next few minutes explaining to you how you might do this. Incidentally, I have a quiz. I'll mention it again at the end of the video, but there'll be again a link in the description below, which I would highly recommend that you take, because it's very relevant to this video. Anyway, let's get on with it. So how do I propose to do that? Well, it might not be a surprise to you if you've been following this channel that my main focus is actually in ground up property development. In other words, I source land and then I build out that land and I build to sell. But equally, a viable proposition is a buy to rent, a build to rent proposition. And so therefore, the way this works is that if you are taking a property and you just got, let's just say this is the property here, generally what you're going to do is when you actually look to build this property, you need to ensure that there is a 25% of the build of the end value, the gross development value, so GDV. So GDV essentially means the valuation of the property once it hits the market. In other words, what that valuation is going to be. So whether that's one property, 10 properties, or 100 properties, whatever it is the total valuation. In other words, if you think in terms of supermarket, it's the retail price for that product that you are selling. But of course, like any business, there needs to be a profit center, and there needs to be a gross profit and a net profit. So the gross profit is essentially the amount of money that they need to charge in order to cover their expenditures and to make a net profit. So gross profit less expenditure becomes net profit. So this is why we talk about the 25%. This is equivalent to the gross profit in any other particular business. And the reason why this is critical is that when you go to get lending for development, a lender is going to look for 25% of GDV profit because they understand the risks that can be involved in the property development business, but they also understand the expenses that come along with it, and therefore your need to be able to make that profit. So right up front, if you do your sums right, you're going to know what this is going to sell for. In other words, you're not really hoping what a surveyor is going to value it at. But incidentally, you can go to a surveyor before you even start the whole process and get a valuation, because they'll give you a valuation on that, unlike existing properties. The beauty of it is that if you're building for yourself, then you are you don't face the competition, because there's not a lot of other people that are actually looking for that property. But then in addition to that 25%, if you do it the right way, you'll find the land off market. And that off-market land will generally not have any planning permission in place. And so therefore you need to be compensated for gaining that planning. And so if you typically think of a piece of ground, let's just take an open field in the countryside, not likely that you're going to build on that, but if we look at that, because that's the lower end of land values, typically somewhere around about £10,000 an acre currently. So if you think of £10,000 an acre, and then you put planning on that, it would be many multiples. Can they be up to like 100 times that valuation with planning in place? So you can see that there's a huge amount of potential profit within a piece of land. That profit you're going to share with the landowner, so you're going to help them realize substantially more than the value of the land is currently in its current state without planning, but you are also going to be compensated for the amount of value that you are adding to that through your expertise, identifying the site in the first place, being able to then add the value by gaining planning permission. So there's a profit center there, which is in addition to your 25% of gross development value. And that's what makes building out your own properties for rental a very attractive proposition, because first of all, the amount of profit that you can make out of it is substantially more, but it allows you to genuinely leave no money in, but have real equity in the property right from day one when it's completed. So I believe it's a really good strategy to follow. Now, I've only touched on it just now, but what I suggest you do is take the survey that I mentioned earlier and just get an understanding of where your gaps are in terms of knowledge. If you want, you can book a call with me and we can discuss it a little bit more. But essentially, I just want you to really understand this concept as a different way to approach residential property investment. So I hope they found this useful. If you have, please like and share it as well, because I think a lot of other people should really understand this philosophy. I think it's of value to. If you're new to the channel, I would love you to subscribe. And the next week, what I'm actually going to talk about is how you create a debt-free portfolio. So tune in to that video as well. Until the next time, take care. Bye-bye.